अस्सलाम वालेकुम ख़वातीन हज़रात, दिस इज इसरार कसाना वंस अगेन। आपको मैंने बताया था कि आज हम शो करेंगे इमिग्रेशन के हवाले से। और लेकिन उससे पहले ये मास्क आप देख रहे हैं ना, ये मास्क जो है ये मैं रोजाना पहन रहा हूँ इसलिए कि आपको मैं याद दहानी करवा दूं कि जो जो लोग भी बाहर निकलें, प्लीज फॉर गॉड सेक मास्क पहन के जाएं। और जिस तरीके से हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि कोरोना पाकिस्तान में और बाकी जगहों पे फैल रहा है, तो सबसे जरूरी बात यह है कि आप जब भी बाहर निकलें खुद को भी पहनाएं और बच्चों को भी पहनाएं। तो अपने लिए, अपने बच्चों के लिए और लोगों की जिंदगियों के लिए मास्क पहनना शुरू कर दें। आपको मेरी तरफ से रिक्वेस्ट है। और आपने कल मेरे से प्रॉमिस भी किया था, लोगों ने मैसेज किए थे कि हम प्रॉमिस कर देंगे, हम पहनेंगे। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, थैंक यू वेरी मच। और दूसरी चीज, एक चीज मैं जो कहना चाहता हूँ वो ये है कि कल रात कैलगरी में बहुत शदीद हेल स्टॉर्म हुआ, बहुत ज्यादा यालाबारी हुई। और उसकी वजह से हमारा जो खास तौर पे जो नॉर्थ ईस्ट का इलाका है, वहां पे बहुत सारे लोगों को नुकसान बर्दाश्त करना पड़ा है। घरों का नुकसान, गाड़ियों का नुकसान, शीशे टूट गए, उनके विंड स्क्रीन्स टूट गई हैं। बहुत शदीद नुकसान हुआ है। तो मैं उनके साथ, उनके दुख में, उनके दर्द में इस वक्त हम लोग शरीक हैं। अल्लाह ताला उनके लिए आसानियां पैदा करे। और उम्मीद है कि बाकी लोग भी जो उनकी खिदमत कर रहे हैं उनको भी अल्लाह ताला तौफीक देगा। तो कमिंग बैक टू द प्रोग्राम, आज हमारा प्रोग्राम है इमिग्रेशन के हवाले से। और इमिग्रेशन की जब बात आती है कैलगरी में, तो बहुत बड़ा नाम और बहुत ही अच्छा नाम, हमारे एक दोस्त हैं राज शर्मा साहब। हियर ही इज। राज, कैसे हैं आप?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, Israr. It's good to see you again. काफी काफी चिर हो गया since we last since our last मुलाकात.
हाँ, सिंस अब लास्ट मुलाकात। और आज हमने ये करना है कि हमने पंजाबी को, उर्दू, हिंदी को और इंग्लिश को सबको मिक्स करना है। ठीक है ना जी? तो जिथे ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਯਾਦ ਆਏਗੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੋਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਆਏਗੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਬੋਲ ਲੈਣਾ, ਵਰਨਾ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੈ ਹੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ।
That's
ਠੀਕ
true.
ਹੈ ਜੀ।
क्योंकि
ਅੱਛਾ,
yeah,
ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ
unfortunately, yeah,
ਇਹ ਦੱਸੋ
unfortunately,
ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ
Punjabi
ਤੁਹਾਡੀ
and Hindi ਵਿੱਚ ਹੱਥ ਥੋੜਾ ਤੰਗ ਹੈਗਾ.
कोई गल नहीं, कोई गल नहीं। अच्छा, मैं लोगों को जरा ये बता दूं कि राज जो हैं, इनसे मेरा बड़ा पुराना ताल्लुक है। जब से मैं कनाडा में आया हूं इनसे मेरा तारुफ हुआ। और उस दिन से ही हमारी दोस्ती होगी, बिकॉज वी कनेक्टेड वेरी इजीली। तो और उसमें एक और चीज मैं आपको बताऊं कि जिसकी वजह से हम लोग कनेक्ट हुए, वो ये थी कि राज के पास एक गाड़ी है जिसको एम्बेसडर कहते हैं। और आपने फिल्मों में देखा होगा, इंडियन फिल्मों में हम देखा करते थे कि एक बड़ी खूबसूरत सी गाड़ी हुआ करती थी। और राज ने वो इंडिया से मंगवाई हुई है। तो मैं जरा पूछूंगा राज, ਇਹ ਦੱਸੋ ਕਿ ਐਮਬੈਸਡਰ ਦਾ ਕਿਤੋਂ ਖਿਆਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਇਆ? ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੋਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਮੰਗਵਾ ਲਈ?
Yeah, I don't know, Israr, क्योंकि
Let me
I'm
show it
not.
to you.
Yeah, I'm not a huge India file. I don't know. कुछ मेरे खास दोस्त है कि उन्होंने पता that I actually overstayed a visa in India.
हाँ,
कुछ 10 साल पहला, 12 साल पहला, I had to get myself deported from India. So it's not like, there's not a huge amount of mohabbat between me and India, but for whatever reason, this classic car stuck with me. I think बचपन ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ, my dad would always get an ambassador.
हाँ,
And this would be the car that we'd go around in our pind in Punjab. Um, and at one point, I was just like, a hosa that, because it's relatively difficult. Number one, this
हाँ,
ambassador is internet design koi change nahi kita. This is the problem when you have a
हाँ,
closed market system. So 50 saal ke liye, koi tabdili, no updating. This is the same design from 1960 to 2010.
हाँ,
So at a certain point, I was like, a hosada ke nahi hosada. A good friend of mine, Nadeem Ismail, said, "Let's give it a shot." We got it imported, and then another good friend of mine, Manmeet Pullar, at that time was the
हाँ,
Minister of Service Alberta,
लेट
so,
मनमीत, हाँ,
late Manmeet Pullar, Singh
हाँ,
Pullar. So he actually got this thing certified. I guess it's roadworthy. It's the safety inspection was somehow waived,
हम्म,
somehow taken care of, and so now it's on the road. So it's on the road for summertime. It's very a lot of nakra. This car has a lot of nakra, but it's again, it's 50 years old, so I guess it's going to have a little bit of nakra. And but 4 or 5 times out of a year, I'll drive it.
हाँ। लेकिन लोगों को मैं ये बता दूं कि मतलब मुझे ये ऑनर हासिल हुई है इसमें बैठने की। एंड इट वाज अ वंडरफुल ड्राइव एक्चुअली, बड़ा मजा आया। और राज, वैसे Is it tough to drive, Ambassador, here in Calgary?
Yeah, it is a little bit tough to drive. Because number one is that it's going 50-55 horsepower हैगा, which really motorcycles in Canada have more horsepower than this car. And so it's very, very slow. So acceleration is very slow. And so you really have to savdani. You really got to look ahead and predict what's going to happen. So it's a manual transmission, of course. So no problem. Luckily, mere Walid Saab had taught me to drive a stick since I was a kid. So no problem there. But it has no mirrors. So it has no mirrors. So as you can see from this shot, there's no side mirrors.
Right.
The rear mirror is obscured because there's curtains in the back. So the curtains in the back, so you can't see it. I mean, forget this, the backup camera that these cars have these days. This thing you can't even see out of the rear view mirror. So it is a little bit tough. Doing a shoulder check is tough. You got to really roll down the window, right? Khidki niche karke, you got to stick your head out. But luckily, because it's very distinctive, other drivers take care and they don't do anything stupid as well. So I think, and you're driving at 50 kilometers or sub 50 kilometers, so it's okay.
और ਉਹਦੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨੰਬਰ ਪਲੇਟ ਸੀ ਨਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ 786 ਆਂਦਾ ਸੀ.
Yeah, I got that. Well, yeah. So a number of things. We were just talking about the movie poster behind me, but same thing. That Satsu chassis. Divar has the Satsu chassis badge. I got the. It's actually on my poster as well. So there's. I got the Satsu chassis and the number plate as well.
Wonderful. अच्छा दूसरा मैं भी लोगों ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਦਿਆਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸ਼ੌਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਫੀ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਔਰ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੁਹੰਮਦ ਅਲੀ ਬਾਕਸਰ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬੜਾ ਆਈਡੀਅਲ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਪਰਸਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਹੈ.
Yeah, that's true. I've met Muhammad Ali. In fact, I met Muhammad Ali at Manmeet Singh Pullar's wedding in 2012. So I met Muhammad Ali, have some memorabilia. I think some more memorabilia on other walls, but yeah.
Wonderful. Raj, thank you, yaar. Thank you for joining us today. Or let's get back to the immigration thing. Ki ho raha hai immigration de utte? Ki latest hai? What's hot in immigration right now?
Well, lots, I guess. Immigration, just generally speaking, immigration in Canada for the last few years, everything has been done through the website. So almost on a weekly basis, monthly basis, there was changes, tabdiliyan to immigration rules, policy, things of that nature. Immigration in the last few years has been very, very good for South Asians. So for sure, even Pakistan now, we're looking at... we're getting an SDS, so strategic direct stream, just for international students out of Pakistan. So just historically, the numbers of international students from Pakistan, very, very low compared to, let's say, India. You're talking about less than 10%. I mean, let's say 3,000 international students out of Pakistan. Almost the same numbers as Vietnam. And that shouldn't be, just given the number of, I guess, padhe likhe and people with money and higher institutions in Pakistan. So India was 40,000, 50,000 plus per year. The craze really took off. Pakistan was very, very low. We finally got SDS, Strategic Direct Stream for Pakistan, which is 6.0 IELTS, $10,000 GIC, plus they offer admission, and it will be very fast. And then all of a sudden, Corona hit. So Corona has affected multiple lines of immigration in Canada. So multiple lines means citizenship ceremonies are all canceled. So citizenship, they've done one virtual citizenship ceremony, but other than that, citizenship has been directly affected. Visitors to Canada, no visitor processing unless there's an exemption or exception to the ban on non-essential travel. I was an immigration officer. I was a refugee protection officer. Those are ek mein jo ghatna thi in New York. I was a refugee protection officer, and you saw little Pakistan in Brooklyn. You had 20,000, 25,000 Pakistanis in one area of Brooklyn. You saw them all cross the border after the immigration changes, and so we then instituted the Safe Third Country Agreement with the U.S. But this is the first time that I can recall that the U.S.-Canada border has been shut down. And they're turning away immigrants, for example, or refugee claimants as well. So it's quite remarkable. I mean, as in, कुछ 15, 17 साल, 18 साल के लिए मैं ये काम कर रहा हूँ. मैं पहले immigration officer भी रह चुका हूं, and this is the first time that we've seen that border become a hard border. This is the first time that there's been limits to entry in terms of visitors, students, delays in citizenship, just multiple lines. Almost every line in immigration has been affected, other than express entry. Express entry is online electronic application for permanent residence, and even there we're going to see some more tabdiliya. We're going to see, in my opinion, we're going to see federal skilled worker come down. We're going to see Canadian experience class go up. We saw family class. Delayed now. First time since 2012. Parents, grandparents. It was supposed to open up in April.
Right.
And so that's done as well.
अच्छा, ਇਹ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਨਾਲ COVID-19 ਦਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਹੋਇਆ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ? ਕੀ ਕਲਚਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੇਂਜ ਆਇਆ ਹੈ, ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੇਂਜ ਆਇਆ, ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਵਕਤ?
Yeah, I mean, I think Corona for sure impacted, let's say, family class, parents, grandparents. वो कह रहे थे April में वो शुरू हो जाएगा, and everyone was gearing up. People were calling, okay, Sharma ji, what's the requirements going to be, right? And I'm like, and I would say my standard line, which is like, look, मैं पंडित हूँ, मैं ज्योतिषी तो नहीं हूँ, right? Like I don't know exactly. We'll have to wait until they tell us what's on the website, and we'll go from there. And then grandparent class was shut down. That causes a lot of issues. I've got a Pakistani client. He makes $200,000 a year. He's been trying for 4 or 5 years to bring his parents here, because the nonsense of the family class, the lottery system, first one, right? Like the last year's program was like some sort of Black Friday sale in Best Buy, where you've got, these door crasher sales. It was just bakwas for the, it's been just, it's so stupid that literally you could get a bunch of grade 6, grade 7-year-old students, 12, 13, 14 saal students could come up with a better policy for family class reunification in Canada, as opposed to what we've seen the last few years.
Right. So how are you seeing your clients nowadays? Corona di wajah to?
We haven't shut down. So this is one of Canada's largest immigration law firms. We haven't quite shut down. We did switch to a lot of Skype, a lot of Zoom, a lot of online meetings, but shayad kuch 2-3 hafte we didn't see clients in person. We've put up some plexiglass, and shuru se, I mean, look, we're dealing with clients from Africa to China to Europe to South America. Like shuru se, we've been using sanitizers. Shuru se, I've been washing my hands. Like kuch log 5 waqt din mein namaz padhte hain. Like I would wash my hands more than that. So that was long standing policy for us. I would avoid shaking hands anyway, because why? So again, luckily we haven't had any sort of issues. We're still meeting people in person and remotely. Look at this. We're meeting remotely. It's quite, the interaction
very convenient.
is very smooth.
Very convenient.
Yeah.
Acha, I've seen a lot of lawyers offering free legal clinics. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ?
Well, I mean, no, and I'll tell you why. So number one, this is probably a free legal clinic, but a couple of things. I don't think necessarily lawyers are offering free legal clinics because of any sort of, let's say, hamdardi or some sort of like overall humanitarian considerations. It's because their phones stop ringing. And when lawyers' phones stop ringing, that's when they start doing these sort of free clinics and of that nature. So no, I haven't gone free. I'm happy, my blog is there. I'm writing a book on immigration. I'm on your show. I'm on other shows as well. So I'm trying to do my best for other people. But, I still have 20 employees, and, free doesn't pay their bills, and free,
Absolutely.
that doesn't cover the bill battiyan over here. So.
बिल्कुल ठीक है. अच्छा, ये एक हमारे क्वेश्चंस भी आ रहे हैं साथ साथ. मैं एक क्वेश्चन ले रहा हूँ कि how I get visa for Canada from Dubai.
Okay, so look, that's a very, very, very vague question. Okay, so the vague question is this: is that immigration to Canada is like, agar aap koi Pakistani or Indian restaurant pe jayenge, there's going to be a lunch buffet. And again, I don't know. Corona ke baad, I don't know if there's going to be buffet anymore. because apparently that's one of the best ways to spread this thing. So when you talk about visa to Canada from Dubai, okay, so let's break that down. So what are we talking about? Visitor visa, student visa, work visa, PR visa, right? Out of the PR visa, what is it? Economic or non-economic? So if it's economic, then do we meet the threshold for express entry? Aapke points bante hain, nahi bante, right? Do you have a non-economic application? Can you be sponsored by a family member to Canada? Okay, so that's PR. Now let's talk about visitor, student, work permit. Work permit needs a LMIA, labor market impact assessment. I don't know how many LMIAs we're going to be getting these days because kam se kam 15% unemployment hogi in Alberta. So that may impact the ability for an employer to get an LMIA. Although I've been doing a lot of them for trucking companies. So a lot of Indian, Pakistani, South Asians that are truck drivers in Dubai and the Middle East, those guys are coming because of the work experience, and it's verifiable work experience. Now, if you're a visitor in Dubai, now this complicates things. Let's say you're a Pakistani or Indian or Bangladeshi in Dubai. So now you're a national of country A, you're in country B, and now you want to come to country C. Okay, so Canada is going to say, okay, what's the status in Dubai? Right? Is he going to go back to Dubai? Is he going to go back to Pakistan or India? Now, it's always a little bit tough. I think Kuwait just kicked out a bunch of Pakistanis.
Yes.
Right? And I think that just happens all the time. I think Qatar is doing it, and they've done it. And the immigration status, even temporary, of Indians and Pakistanis in the Middle East is not great, right? This, the Arabs have their own concept of the Ummah, I think, right? And so you've got a very, very precarious status over there. And so you'll have to then, it's almost easier to get a visitor visa from Pakistan or India rather than...
राज इमरान कसाना साहब ने एक उसका जवाब दिया है. वो कह रहे हैं कि because somebody told me I will give you a visa with 60 lakh rupees, but this is too much.
Yeah, so look, 60 lakhs means that there's going to be some guftagu. 60 lakh rupees means that there's going to be some fraud, right? Because it's a 3-page application.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, I see Imran Saab has a residence visa in Dubai.
Yeah.
Look, Imran Saab, 60 lakhs means that there's going to be some fraudulent documents submitted on your behalf. These officers know वो ये documents, ये जो तरीके हैं या तरकीब हैं, उनसे वो सब वाकिफ हैं. And so you might be slapped with a 5-year misrepresentation ban if they discover that there's some sort of khamiyat or beyond khamiyat in your documents. So 60 lakhs for a 3-page application means there's going to be some fraudulent documents submitted.
Right. Okay. Taimur Adil Gilani sahab पूछ रहे हैं कि I want a process for family immigration to Canada. Kindly guide me about its process. Family को कैसे लेके आ सकते हैं?
Taimur sahab, I guess stay tuned. I mean, abhi it's 2020. Abhi picture baki hai. There's no family class. There's no parent, no grandparent. Was supposed to be opened in April, was shut down. They're retooling. I don't know yet. I think there's going to be an absolute rush and glut of immigration applications. Agle 4-5 mahine mein, we're going to be very, very busy. I don't know. I mean, if you look at historically the years past, family class, they want 3 years notices of assessments. So 3 years notices of assessments to meet a certain income requirement to sponsor your parents. So that's LICO plus 30%. So then it depends on the size of your family unit. And of course, do we have the requisite tax documents? I mean, Filhal, we've got the super visa. The super visa is still going on. There is an exemption. You can apply for a visitor visa or super visa. Mom and dad can come to Canada to be with their kid. That is an essential purpose. It can be done on a TRV, temporary resident visa.
Good. अच्छा, ऐ दसो कि Trump the policies, the immigration in Canada te कितना impact होया जी?
Lots. I think Trump himself doesn't know the impact on the policies that he announces. So I think that there's going to be lots of impact. So if you look at Donald Trump's an interesting individual, and he's put this sort of America first policy. So there's multiple lines of business will be impacted by Donald Trump. I'll give you one example. So by strengthening enforcement proceedings down in the US, what he's done is that he directly caused, 30,000, 50,000, 70,000 people to cross the border illegally into Canada to make a refugee claim. So that decision alone has caused a massive backlog in the Immigration and Refugee Board. So that's just one part of his policy. Now, he's sending out messages about H-1Bs. So H-1Bs, highly skilled, highly remunerated professionals. A lot of them are software guys from India, Pakistan. He's sending out signals that you're not wanted here. So what that means is that they're gonna see, well, can we come into Canada?
Right.
One of the companies we set up in Calgary and around Canada is called Mob Squad. Mob Squad is a very interesting policy. It's set up by a Muslim, born in Canadian-born Muslim. Very, very interesting. What he did is there's a H-1B cap in the US.
Right.
There's no cap here. So what he's done is he's set up offices here. He's going to get approval to hire these software guys in the US. They'll come to Canada, work here on a work permit for the same companies down in the US. But the companies now pay him. So the companies pay him whatever, 120 grand or something. He'll take his cut and then he'll pay the guys here. And then these guys are going to pay the taxes in Canada. So brilliant, simple solution. But Donald Trump has directly caused a benefit to Canada by allowing us to poach these highly skilled individuals that, let's face it, their first preference was the US. So, Kasana Sahib, I mean, you've probably been to very, very few bars or nightclub in your life. Okay.
Right.
So, but I have. So I'll so the analogy is that Canada and US was the beautiful woman at the bar that got most of the attention. Right. Canada was that girl's less beautiful cousin or friend. Not a lot of people were paying attention to Canada. Now they're paying attention to Canada because all of a sudden Canada is a very desirable option as opposed to the US.
बिल्कुल सही है. अच्छा, वो ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਸਾਈਲਮ ਦਾ ਉਤੇ ਅਸਾਈਲਮ ਸੀਕਰਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਨੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਵਿੱਚ. ਉਹ ਜ਼ਾਹਿਰ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਤਰਫ ਹੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋਣੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਕੀ ਅਸਲ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਹੈ? ਕਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਕਰੇਜ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ? ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ?
No, and here's the thing. And so the corona allowed them to shut down a sort of, they are turning back. So if you've made an asylum claim in the US, you will be forestalled from making a claim in Canada. That's different. That's new. That's 2020. So pehle, aap asylum ka panah ki darkhast aap kar sakte the in US, and then it was taking 4 or 5 years. You could actually cross into Canada and advance a similar claim here. That is not happening right now. So it is very challenging right now for, jo bhi asylum ki ya panah ki darkhast wahan kiya tha, it is impacting their ability and their options in Canada.
ਅੱਛਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ H1B ਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਰਾਜ, ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਟਫ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ. ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਕਰੇਗਾ?
It's tough to say. So my older brother is an immigration attorney in the US. So he does a lot of H-1Bs. So it's a big impact on him. A lot of the H-1Bs were these guys, these South Indian guys, the Hyderabadis, the Bangalorean guys. So Bangalore, Hyderabad guys. And it makes no sense because these guys were making $100,000 plus, paying taxes in the US, obviously. And so that seems to be very, very strange. Normally, Trump supporters are not guys threatened by H-1B software engineers. Trump's supporters, would be low-wage guys threatened by undocumented migrants like Mexicans, right? I mean, it was a really strange, really strange, odd move for Trump to hammer the H-1B guys.
ਅੱਛਾ, ਮੈਰਿਜ ਫਰਾਡ ਵੀ ਉੱਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ. ਮੈਰਿਜ ਫਰਾਡ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਲਿਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਫਿਰ ਫਰਾਡ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਕਾਫੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ.
Not well. I mean, not right now, I suppose. Like filhal, the focus is on this other, temporary residents, students, workers, permanent resident processing, spousal sponsorships. Marriage fraud has always been with us, and marriage fraud will always be with us, right? So Kasana Sahib, I mean, just think about it. Like, if you're some metric fail guy from Bathinda and forget getting 6.0 in IELTS, you can't even get a 6.0 in Punjabi. How are you gonna, how are you going to come to Canada, right? The only way to come to Canada is to get married to someone here. So marriage fraud will always be with us because it allows individuals that are ineligible, right? Jada normally up they wouldn't be immigrating to a G7, G8 country. It allows them to come to Canada. So marriage fraud will always be with us. There'll always be, and there's always going to be various, there'll be different niyat behind that marriage fraud. Sometimes it's to help out a rishtadar. Sometimes it's going to be, sometimes both sides are involved in the fraud, right? So there's collusion. Sometimes there's bekasur sort of victim to immigration. There's money, and sometimes there's dosti and rishtadari, and sometimes there's majburi.
And Raj, citizenship oaths were actually postponed on March 14th, right? ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਹੁਣ ਕੀ latest situation ਹੈ? ਲੋਕ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਰ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ?
We've had one virtual citizenship ceremony. One. That's
only one.
I mean, it's so easy to implement certain changes. It's so easy. Like within a couple of weeks, mera beta jo 8 saal ka hai, wo, school ja raha, Google Classroom is set up. Like everything is, and 4-5 घंटे के लिए वो, जो भी तालीम हासिल कर सकता है वो, right? But I'm like, you can't do a Zoom citizenship ceremony. Like, I don't understand. By that point, you've already done everything. By that point, aapke forms jo bhi hai, aapne submit ki hai, like police verification is done. Test ho chuka hai, right? So all you have to do is now do this sort of ceremony. So that's something that they could have brought on board very, very quickly, and they didn't.
So it's just a red tape or what?
I don't know. Or maybe it's just incompetence. I mean, I was just happy that we're getting, so 50 saal pehle, when my dad, mere walid sahab jab aaye the Canada pe, apply kiya, he was a lecturer at Punjabi University.
Right.
4 mahine mein, he had an interview face to face with the officer, and he got landed under that point system. So I don't understand. So now the permanent resident process still requires at the very, very end an interview or a meeting with an officer. So agar aap kagzat jo bhi hai, applications submitted from within Canada, aap border tak ja sakte the. And you could get landed there, or you could do in Canada landing. You could make an appointment and go to Harry Hayes. They've now changed that. They don't want in-person meetings. So now they are getting telephone landing. And again, very easy to implement. No reason. I mean, it's a 2-3 minute ki interview. Agar aap wahan jate hain, it's 2-3 minutes, right? They're not going to discover any fraud by that point, right? I mean, everything is in. It's 99.9% is done. So nothing's going to happen in that interaction. So they moved landing at least to telephone, which is good. And I think that might continue in the future as well.
Good. अच्छा, एक और बड़ा important issue, राज, जो आप भी देखते हैं, वो है रेसिज्म का. अभी हमने डेविड फ्लॉयड का एपिसोड देखा जो अमेरिका में चल रहा था. ऐथे की हो रहा है? ऐथे, do you think there is a real racism here, in systemic racism here in Canada too?
So 5 saal pehle there was a racist diatribe captured on the dash cam of a Pakistani taxi driver. And CBC had asked me to write something on racism in Canada, and which I did. And so I read that recently, and I was like, not a lot has changed. I think individual acts of racism are very, very prevalent in Canada. Khas karke jo, South Asians, Pakistanis, I mean, Indians. I mean, I was called a Paki growing up. I remember in grade 4, these kids were older, called me Paki and spit on me. I still remember that. That was grade 4. So the racism of that Pakistanis and Indians or South Asians is a little bit different than the racism in the US and the racism of indigenous in Canada.
Right.
So Indians or Pakistanis or Sikhs or, they've sort of, or Asians, Chinese in general, have sort of, they're the model immigrant, right?
Right.
ये सर नहीं उठाते, ये, काम करते, and so they're the good immigrant. And so
Right.
that's a little bit different in terms of systemic racism. Yeah, there might be some. If you look at, for example, lawyers or other professions, people with names or different names are sort of slotted in a particular area. And so
Right.
I don't think it's any coincidence that, lawyers of color are become immigration lawyers or become family law lawyers or become, there's not a lot of them becoming securities lawyers, right?
Right. Right.
But for whatever reason, we seem to be slotted there, but that's okay. But I think indigenous, I think that's where you have systemic racism. That's where, इनके जो residential school थे, the last residential school was shut down in 1996, and जो भी वो कर रहे थे, it's horrific. It's horrific.
It is.
Like what Canada did to indigenous wouldn't even happen in India or Pakistan. Like जब हम सोच रहे हैं भी, hey, Pakistan में, there's problems between Sunni and Shia. There's problems with their minorities. There's perhaps forced conversions here. You look at India. You look at Jammu Kashmir. You look at Punjab. You look at these other states, right? Like,
right.
It not even, in my opinion, it's not even close to what the Canadians did to the indigenous, right? And so
Absolutely.
put them in their own sort of reservation. It's apartheid, right? And so South Africa studied its apartheid system, took its, took all that from Canada.
Right. Right.
And eugenics. The Nazis were sterilizing people. Canada was this lady that was sterilized, a native lady that was sterilized, came to my law school to tell me about it. And that was not right. Like, so this is within, our yadash. So definitely, is it there? Yes. Does it impact us and, my children, mere bacche, aapke bacche, in a different way? And again, I think, Neil and Meghna will have a different experience for sure than me. On some level, it's made me or us perhaps a little bit better. Like the Asians, we know we have to. I think it's made us better because we know we have to try harder to succeed. So maybe on some level, a little bit of racism was good for us or Asians. It's a big problem for the indigenous and the First Nations.
लेकिन राज क्या ऐसा नहीं ਹੁੰਦਾ कि ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਾਈਟਸ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਮੀਡੀਓਕ੍ਰਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਐਕਸੈਲ ਕਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਲਰਡ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਅਗਰ ਐਕਸੈਲ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋਣ ਤਾਂ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਂਦੇ
No, Kasana Sahab, you're 100% right. So ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ racism ਜਾਂ systemic racism ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, there's a reason why what underpins the success of mediocre white men.
Right.
You look at Andrew Scheer, who's the leader of the CPC. This guy is as mediocre as they get, right? You are overqualified by this man in every single aspect, right? And so it is quite remarkable. You're right. And so you have to be probably 20-25%, you got to be better. 20-25%, you got to be better just to have that, just to be on the same level almost, right? So it's definitely there. And this is why there's a support for Trump. This is why the support for various politicians, because unko pata hai, right? Unko pata hai ki unka jo time hai, unka jo bhi zamana hai, it's done. And you can only, and my dad always says this, you can only hold you can't hold down a good man forever. And
Absolutely.
so if you look at, for example, aajkal jo bhi ho raha hai with Winston Churchill, the Gore think that Winston Churchill defeated Adolf Hitler, this racist. Well, jo bhi South Asia se hai, unko pata hai ki Winston Churchill might have caused or exacerbated the 3 million West Bengal famine.
Absolutely.
He hated Indians at that time, obviously, pre-partition. He hated brown people, right? Like he was in Khartoum. He was in Khartoum. I was reading his book. He's in Khartoum. They killed 80,000 of those guys with machine guns, right? Like,
Yeah.
and they're fighting with wooden shields. So it's a reckoning, and the Gore, I guess, now have to deal with it, right? That's their thing, and they'll have to deal with it. But we always knew, right? Like, our history, our version of history is a little bit different.
Right. ਅੱਛਾ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਰਾਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਈਵਨ ਯੂਰਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਦੇਸੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਜ਼ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਸਟ ਟੂ ਫਾਈਟ ਦਿਸ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਐਂਡ ਗੈਟ ਓਵਰ
I think the approach is different. So if you're South Asian in the US, it's going to be a little bit different. You have to maybe take a back seat. Joby Hora, like, look, I don't know what the stats are, but I don't know the numbers of Asian, brown, Indian, Pakistani men killed by the police in the US. It's pretty low. So I think if you're in the US, you're going to take a back seat and hopefully support Jirvi Jai's Jirvi Shikayat Hagia of the African Americans. I think that's what we do. In terms of Canada, again, it's a little bit different because we are modeled to be the good immigrant. We're modeled to be law-abiding. We're modeled to be not to create too much grief. But there's an opportunity here, and there's mocha here as well. And so, kuch saal pehle in Ontario, there's a huge issue about Sharia. Right now, Sharia's got this crazy connotations to it. Right. And so a lot of, as soon as someone tells me like Sharia law, and I'm like, listen, Sharia means law.
Right.
It's not Sharia law. It's not law, right? It's just, it's like chai tea, right? It's just Sharia. And so what they wanted to do was they wanted to have some sort of arbitration or informal resolution of interpersonal disputes. No one was arguing about Sharia in criminal law. And other communities, like, for example, the Jewish community and the Ismaili Council, like there's arbitration administration that is set up, but Sharia has such a negative connotation. You mention it that it's done, right? Or you mention like religious schools, and you say, "Hey, religious schools get funding. Let's do this for the Islamic community." Well, that's a big deal, even though it's not a big deal for the Catholics or again the Jewish community.
Right.
So I think that there's nuanced discussions that we can take part in, and we can decrease this sort of fear. I think and this is, in the US, there's a fear of the black man, which obviously is very, very lethal to them. And I think in Canada and the US, there's a fear of Muslims and Islam. So that fear level, you got to move the fear level down. And engage with that as well. So I think there's lots to be done. And like I said in my article 5 years ago, there's good promising signs. There's positive developments. There is some ways to go. I mean, Quebec right now is thanking Muslim and persons of color and these asylum claimants that are working in long-term care. Okay.
Sure.
So they've put their buzurg in these horrendous, horrific, ghatia, right? Pure ghatia pad to what they've done with their senior citizens. And now they're dying. And taking care of them. Well, it's people that look like us. And now they're like, okay, inko immigration status deni chahiye. Okay, you conjures, what? Okay, when you started banning the Sikh doctors with their turbans or their beards or the kippa or any outward sign of faith, you're pushing these guys out of the province, and now all of a sudden, like, we need these guys, and so the tune has changed. So, Quebec's bill that banned outward signs of religious affiliation was 100% wrong, and Justin Trudeau was 100% wrong in not coming out against it, right? And by the way, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Jagmeet Singh, who's an observant Sikh, who I've met personally, he was wrong for not calling that out. So I mean, that was pure racism in Quebec and this sort of nonsense, secularism. So there's lots to be done in Canada. But you asked, Kasana Sahab, you asked aapne pehle pucha tha about systemic racism. You have a legislation, you have a bill in Quebec that bans. What's more important to an observant Sikh than his dastar, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Again, other than the Ahmadis in Pakistan, Pakistan or India probably couldn't get away with what Quebec got away with a few months ago.
एब्सोल्युटली बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं आप. अच्छा, टुवर्ड्स द वेरी एंड राज, एक और क्वेश्चन है. मेरा ख्याल है पहले हम इस पे बात कर चुके हैं. ये भी यही पूछ रहे हैं कि फैमिली को मैंने लेके जाना है तो क्या किया जाए. आई मीन टू से किड्स एंड माय वाइफ, ये सारा कुछ.
Yeah, it's your wife, so that's easy. So sponsor the wife. Obviously, you have to be, if you're a permanent resident or a citizen, you can sponsor a wife to Canada. There's some eligibility concerns or issues, so make sure you meet the eligibility. And he's asking, please tell me the easy way. I guess Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path. All right. The path is, check out the website. Sponsoring your wife and children should be very, very straightforward. If you're a citizen, your kids might, and if your kids were born after you became a citizen, you could just apply for citizenship for them, for example.
मेरा ख्याल है कि अली आदिल साहब मेरा ख्याल है पाकिस्तान तो इत्थे आना चाहते हैं फैमिली दे नाल.
Well, again, it goes back to the Indian or Pakistani sort of buffet. So, I mean, if you have money, verifiable money, then that's one thing. And so there's different provincial investor class applications, particularly Manitoba. Manitoba is looking good. Maybe minimum investment of $150,000, $200,000 outside of Winnipeg. In BC, you're looking at kam as kam 4 lakh, 5 lakh. But a lot of Indians have approached me on this topic, on investor class, and I always say, again, this muhavra that my dad gave me was like, "Jira pind nahi jano da raah na pucho." Like, right? Like, they want to know your first rupee. Like, where did you get your first dollar? And there's a lot of black money in India and Pakistan, and it's tough to really establish net worth over there. So, these sort of business investment class applications, people look at it or try it, and it rarely works out. But again, there's options. There are options, but it's a very, very sort of open-ended question. Very hard for me to answer that particular question.
अच्छा राज, अगर लोगों ने तुहाडे नाल कांटेक्ट करना होए ते ओदा की तरीका होएगा?
Website is great, Kasana Sahab. So, sshLaw.ca. That's our website. They can give us a call. Email is always best. That's info at sshLaw.ca. And we'd be happy to help. But we don't. I hate chuti tasalli, and I hate that sort of like the Indian like the hedging like ho jayega. Look, I don't like that. So I'm a very, very, I'm a straight shooter. If we can help, we will definitely help. But if we can't, we can't. And there's too many schemes out there. There's too many, I think har khandan mein kam as kam ek immigration vakil hai or ek like doctor. So you got, and half knowledge is more dangerous than no knowledge. So we'd be happy to help, and you can certainly look us up and we're around and looking forward to assisting our community further.
Inshallah. Raj, thank you very much for your time. मैं जरा लोगों को बता दूं कि जिन लोगों ने भी कोई भी क्वेश्चंस हो वो राज साहब को उनकी वेबसाइट के ऊपर कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं. राज इज अ वंडरफुल फ्रेंड और हमारी कम्युनिटी के साथ भी इनका बड़ा इंटरेक्शन रहता है और ही इज अ गुड समैरिटन. बहुत अच्छा इनका स्टाइल भी है, ये लोगों की मदद भी करते हैं इस तरह. और राज, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर योर टाइम. विश यू गॉड स्पीड और आप एम्बेसडर के ऊपर इसी तरह सैर करते रहा करें और हमें आपकी मुख्तलिफ जो तस्वीरें हैं वो मिलती रहनी चाहिए.
I'll come and grab you once this Mahamari is over. I'll come and grab you. We'll go for another drive.
We will go for coffee, inshallah. Thank you, Raj. और नाज़रीन, आखिर में दुआ कि मेरी इज्जत के लिए काफी है कि मैं तेरा ही बंदा हूँ, तो मेरे फख्र के लिए काफी है कि तू ही मेरा परवरदिगार है, तो बिल्कुल उसी तरह जिस तरह मैं चाहता हूँ. मुझे भी उसी तरह बना दे जिस तरह तू चाहता है। स्पुरदम बतोमाए खेचरा तू दानी हिसाब कमो बेचरा। मुझे इसरार किसान को राज शर्मा के साथ इजाजत दीजिए। जल्दी मुलाकात होगी इंशाल्लाह। अल्लाह हाफिज।